wouldn't it make more sense politically and operationally to say, you know what, this is something that the electorate is broadly unhappy with their choices. Okay, it's a given. Americans are always unhappy with their choices. Not quite as unhappy as the French usually are, but unhappy.
Right.
Wouldn't it make more sense, Matt, if it was 2028, where Joe Biden has retired, Donald Trump is finally gone from the political scene, and now you have as wide open an opportunity as we've had in a generation for something like this, with millions, perhaps tens of millions of new voters now on the rolls, millions, perhaps tens of millions of older voters have now passed on. Doesn't that make more sense politically?
Absolutely. And the thing that's so incredibly crazy is that this is the worst possible cycle for them to be doing this for several reasons. The first is, if you look at what No Labels wants out of a president, it is Joe Biden. It is
Right.
it is a moderate who is, moderate by temperament and by nature, who governs as a moderate. I mean, Joe Biden
And works in a bipartisan fashion.
Totally. I mean, he has negotiated with Kevin McCarthy. He has cut deals with Mitch McConnell. Every single bill he signed was voted for by both, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. This is not a radical guy. He is a, church-going Catholic believer. He is a good moral person. He has led us well on the world stage. What the hell do they want?
Right, and as we're recording this, he and the Democrats in the U.S. Senate just cut another deal to keep the government open, right? So,
exactly.
With Mike Johnson, who's not exactly what you'd call a moderate.
Not a bit. And so Joe Biden's kind of the platonic ideal of a no labels president. So A, why would you oppose Joe Biden? B, you have Donald Trump, who is the antithesis of everything they say they want in every possible respect. And C, every single expert, and we have a thing on our website showing this, every expert, not, advocates like you and me, but experts at media places and universities who have looked at this have said, no, they're not going to win the election. They're not going to win a single state. But if they get in this, they're likely to help Trump. Everyone is telling them this, and they seem immune to all reason on this. And that's the thing that is so baffling.
Yeah, and so let's go back to the nuts and bolts. So as I recall, and they might have changed the rules, but they didn't change them enough. So I was always surprised by the idea of an in-person convention in April in Dallas. Not because of Dallas, but because, as I recall, if you're going to be an independent running for president, Texas is the first state that you have to qualify in. And as I recall the rules, and again, they probably changed a little bit, was that between the Wednesday after the Texas primary in March, you basically had an 8-week run to collect about 100,000 valid signatures, Matt, of voters who had not participated in the primary. Okay. Now, Texas is a huge state, and it's not that you could do that in Houston in an afternoon if you wanted to, right? But you also had to have your vice presidential nominee, all your electors, all this other stuff. And so it never made sense to me by anyone who'd ever studied, like the Talmud, like I have, a ballot access spreadsheet, why they would have, decided to go this late when they were giving themselves 2 weeks to get on a state that if they think they could win, they'd have to win, right? And so there was that part. And then there's the what Nancy has said on numerous calls, as I understand it, which is, well, look, if this thing looks like it might help Trump, we'll just pull it off the ballot in July or August. But this is one thing that doesn't make sense to me, Matt, is once you've handed over your ballot line to the candidate, it's theirs. It's not yours anymore.
Exactly. I mean, I am a co-founder and I help run a 501c4 organization. That is what No Labels is. What that means is it's a nonprofit, but the money that comes in isn't tax deductible because it allows you to do more political things. That's what a C4 does. They've got a legal fig leaf that they're using that allows them as a C4 to gain ballot access. But the moment that they nominate someone, that goes away. And they are there. Then that campaign, the No Labels party, is thereby subject to the rules that the Democrats and the Republicans and the Greens and everybody's subject to, which is you got to tell us who your donors are, and they're capped at $2,900. Right now, they can take unlimited donations from billionaires, and they do. that all comes to an end the minute they nominate someone. But the other thing that happens, to your point, when they nominate someone is that they lose control. So let's say they say, all right, our nominee is Larry Hogan, the former governor of Maryland, and, I don't know, Joe Cunningham, ex-congressman. At that point, it's the Hogan-Cunningham campaign for the No Labels party. And Nancy Jacobson, the CEO of No Labels, has absolutely no power, none whatsoever. Now, what they say is, well, we're only going to nominate somebody who agrees with us and who would do what we would hope they would do, which is to, selflessly step aside if it looks like they're going to lose. But that is ridiculous. That is not how this right. works. And so if someone gets onto a ballot, if someone puts themselves out there, if they're taking on two presidents, they're not going to step aside. That's nuts.
Well, and look, you and I are both old advancemen, right? Let's say that, they get this nomination, someone in the Secret Service or the administration makes a determination that, they are now deserving of Secret Service protection as a national candidate. You tell me the presidential and vice presidential nominees of a national party who aren't going to ride out private jets and motorcades for 6 months. I mean, right? Just from a pure ego, right. pomp and circumstance perspective.
Totally. People introducing you all day long as the next president of the United States. I mean, look, that's the thing, is that we all need to convince these folks not to do it before they take that big, gigantic leap into becoming the nominee. Because once they do that, talking them back, it becomes astronomically harder. So we're all committed to helping to push these guys in the right direction and to convince them, look, that may sound attractive to you. And I get that, like, it gets you on TV when you talk this way. But if you do this, you will end your very successful career as a 2-term governor or whatever you are as Jill Stein 2.0. You will be a nobody. You will get 3% of the vote, and you will probably return Donald Trump to power. Is that what you want?
Right. So let me bring together 3 different threads that we've talked about. One is that the No Labels people said that they were going to announce their nominating methodology in October of 2023. Here you and right. I are sitting in the new year. So they haven't done that.
No.
The second thing you said is that, because of that, it's likely that Nancy Jacobson, Mark Penn, Ryan Clancy will make this decision. But with one being an inability or unwillingness to tell people how they're going to do this, 2, the real way that this was always going to work out, 3, doesn't it put that legal piece in jeopardy? And isn't the whole C4 idea not just, Matt, that they can raise unlimited money, but that they can raise unlimited money anonymously?
Yes. That's the key to the C4 thing. And in fact, they've been very strict about not telling the world who their donors are. In fact, Nancy was quoted in a publication last year saying no one cares who our donors are, which is like, LOL. Everyone cares who their donors are. It's been reported that at least some of their donors are people like Nelson Peltz, who was a big Trump donor, at least for a while, and also Harlan Crow, who's the guy that is the very close friend, apparently, of Clarence Thomas, so close that he flies him around in his private jet and brings him to
right.
New Zealand on his yacht. So it's very interesting who their donors are.
As one does, Matt.
Yeah, I got to get new friends because apparently that's what friends do, and my friends definitely don't do that. But in any event, we don't know who the other donors are, and it would be really good to know that. But yeah, this is an elite concoction. It was, dreamed up by Nancy and her team. It is funded by these very rich people who are not disclosed. It is the opposite, by the way, of Ross Perot in 1992. I worked on the Clinton campaign. I remember this. Perot was drafted into running by a group of folks. It wasn't online. There was no online, by a real grassroots movement of people that wanted a voice for, lower deficits and less trade. And he was a folksy, super popular guy. Now, he was very wealthy, but that wasn't the thing. The thing was, he was just very, very popular. This is the opposite. This is a bunch of elites saying, hey, all of you rubes out there, here's your candidate.
Well, I want to talk before we move on to my next thing I want to talk to you. I want to talk about the Ross thing because they invoke Perot a lot. Now, Ross ended up with 19% of the popular vote. He didn't win one electoral vote. Now, he did quit in the middle because he was convinced that the Bush family was going to attack his daughter's wedding. So Ross was also nuts. But he was not a politician. He was fundamentally outside the political system. And he was not a creature of, as you said, Matt, the elites in the political system. He was challenging both the Democratic Party of then Bill Clinton and the Republican Party then of George H.W. Bush. And if you go back and watch his 1992 YouTube video, he called it all. He said, this is what's going to happen. And he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so, that's the thing is that if you look at their, the no labels, they put together some pamphlet or whatever it is, it's the height of insidery, elitist things that don't help Joe Sixpack one iota and help special interest to the nth degree. So even from a belief perspective, they're hollow.
Totally. I mean, look, Perot, I didn't agree with Perot on his fundamental things, but they were very coherent and you could see why people liked it. I mean, like ending trade deals made a degree of sense. And look what happened, 30 years later to the American industrial heartland, because frankly, we in the Clinton administration and others overdid it on globalization and trade. So he wasn't coming out of nowhere. And what he was saying was popular at a kind of very fundamental level. But to your point, that if you read the unbelievably lame policy agenda that they put out, there isn't a person on this earth that says, yeah, that's what I'm for, because mostly it's total pablum intended to not offend anyone.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this is that, living in the world in which we live, if you're not willing to offend anyone, Matt, you're not really willing to do the things necessary to win either. Because,
exactly.
These contests, in a situation where you had multiple candidates, maybe not, but it's win or lose. There's no, we're not a parliamentary system, right? There's no middle ground. There's no coalition. There's no prime minister and all that. And it seems to me that they want to be as inoffensive as they can be while being as damaging as they possibly can be too. And to me, to your point, in my mind, they got about 60 days to get their heads right. And I would hope if there's any of their supporters or any donors, again, I am someone who tried this twice. I am someone, Matt, who was, tried to start a third party before we started the Lincoln Project. I have a lot of sympathy and a lot of belief in the idea of what they're trying to do. But I also live in the real world.
And look, I think one other thing is very important, and it goes to this coalition point that you just raised. They are doing something extraordinarily dangerous beyond what we've already discussed, which is they know in their souls they're not going to win the election. Their candidate is not going to be the president of the United States. No one with 3 brain cells to rub together thinks that that's possible. What they are now saying is they're interested in causing on purpose a contingent election, which is to say, if neither of the major candidates gets 270 electoral votes, the majority of the electoral college, that means that something has to change, or else the House of Representatives votes by delegation, as you noted, and that would mean Trump would win. By the way, Democrats could score a huge, overwhelming blue wave majority in 2024, but they're not going to win a majority of state delegations because Republicans have too many of the small ones like Idaho.
Yeah, I think right now it's 26-22, and there are 2 that are tied or 4 that are tied.
Exactly right. And there is no scenario by which we win a majority. So Republicans will have the majority of the state delegations. If it goes to Congress that way, Trump wins in the worst possible way. But it's even crazier than that, because they have said on the record to NBC News that what they're interested in doing is, if they can win a state or 2, like Pennsylvania or New Hampshire, that allow what are called faithless electors. That is, if they win the state, their electors, the electoral college voters, vote. Those electors could vote for someone other than their candidate in their 13 states that allow this. Let's say they win New Hampshire, that's the difference. Then they go to those electors and say, we're going to bargain with Biden and with Trump see who we get better deals from on policy, on personnel. Maybe we get a vice presidential. It's all completely bananas. It's a parliamentary model that does not work in America. And what you would get, and can you imagine the chaos that would ensue with Trump screaming his head off every minute and them trying to pull this shenanigans in the month or two after the election. So that is the most dangerous thing.
Also sounds a lot like blackmail.
100%. So what they have now done is they have focused on this kind of contingent candidate strategy. And that's the worst possible outcome here. And they really have to be stopped.